Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the Great Movie Ride podcast. I am your host. Which name should I use?
What name did you unuse?
um,
I mean, they already know our names.
True.
Just we don't use last names because that's bad.
Yeah.
Unless you want to know my last name. My last name is
Taco.
Big Braid time. I was gonna say something racist.
Oh boy. My name is Gaston. I am your host of the Great Movie Ride podcast here with my co-host, Jerryofdom.
Yeah.
You'll probably hear us more refer to ourselves by the names Peter and Nick. No relation at all. Absolutely not whatsoever.
Don't worry. It's a code word for something from ancient Greek.
Which is kind of fitting with our topic of the day. So, what is the Great Movie Ride? It is a movie review bod. It's a movie review podcast where we take a look at various movies, new and old, and we review them with insight and depth that we can provide. Me as a major movie fan and Jerryofdom as a major enthusiast of pretty much everything.
I'm an enthusiast?
You're very excitable.
I am?
See, I'll let the audience decide.
Oh, boy.
Um,
No one's going to want to comment about me. They'll be like, oh, God.
And this is our first attempt at doing a podcast. We are, of course, from the Gmod Squad YouTube channel. So I guess we could say that this podcast is brought to you by the Gmod Squad.
Yeah.
Subscribe on YouTube. Don't forget to comment and leave a like and all that fun stuff. We've never done a podcast before, so this should be fun. And our topic for our first podcast is the new Marvel film Eternals, which we just saw last week.
Yeah, it has been a week now.
Yeah, it would have been. Today.
No, we didn't see it on Friday night. We saw it on Sunday night.
Was it Friday night?
No.
So almost a week.
Almost a week.
that we have seen it. By the time you hear this podcast,
We don't know how long it's been.
well, it's going to be out on next Thursday. So
It is? Oh, right. I remember talking about it.
We did actually put some thought into this, I promise.
Thoughts are very important.
Although, well, I've put far more preparation than Jerry and
I
Bob
have
has.
mind notes, it's all in my mind.
Yeah, we'll see how this goes.
It'll go great.
So, we were talking about the Eternals, so we're going to start with our first category, our thoughts about the movie before we even saw it. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. This movie was not excited for. It's very much like, oh, hey, look, new Marvel movie, but there's no excitement behind it. And all the characters, I was like, oh, who even are these people? There wasn't much to really think of. Oh boy, seeing the Celestials, that's pretty cool. That I did like seeing in the trailers. I was like, oh, they're big and huge. Maybe they'll slap Earth and they'll die. But that didn't happen. But it just wasn't intriguing. I wasn't too excited to see it.
Yeah.
That's how I felt.
I agree with that. I had deep concerns about the movie, and I was like you. I didn't really care. The characters, I'm pretty well versed in the comics, but I had no connection to the characters. And it was just kind of like, it's the next MCU film, but it doesn't matter much. It's almost like a footnote. And then the marketing started. We got our first trailer for it, and it didn't make it look any better or any more interesting. I'm like, well, this looks
And they're
boring.
trying to set it up as this huge thing that, and it's like, but it doesn't feel like that. That advertising was horrible.
Yeah. And then because of the delays, the toys for the stuff, which would give us our first look at the characters in their full costumes, those were leaked long before they were available for release. And if you remember, we were on a call, and I was sending you these pictures, and I was just making fun of their designs all over the place.
They weren't that good.
No, the toys did not help.
No.
I thought they all looked boring, but at the same time busy and complicated with all the patterns on their uniforms and costumes and everything. And then, of course, while this marketing for this lackluster event was happening, Black Widow came out,
Yeah.
and then Shang-Chi happened.
Still haven't seen that.
What If
Yeah,
came
what
out.
if happened? That one was, yeah.
And then when the final trailer came out, I will give it that the effects for Icarus
Oh, yeah.
looked really cool with the flying
And,
around and the laser eyes.
Athena.
Athena, yeah.
Athena's weapons look sick.
And we got to see Crow
Yeah.
in the trailers, who is the deviant leader. His name is never said on screen. So there's that. And that presented a plot to us of them uniting to fight the deviants who they thought were destroyed. And it was, again, just like, okay, but why?
Yeah, there was nothing that seemed connected.
Yeah.
And the only thing I ever knew of Eternals was that they talked about it a little bit with certain characters in the MCU before, but it wasn't like direct quoting. It was like, so these people are technically Eternals, but we don't know for sure if they are or not.
Yeah.
No.
Thanos.
Thanos was the big one where everyone's like, he's...
Yeah, in the comics, he is the Titan Eternal.
Yeah. But then nothing was really said about Eternals ever.
No.
And the only thing of Celestials we ever got before was Ego in in Guardians of the Galaxy, not Star-Lord. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
We've all heard the tales of that man's Star War. Star War. That's a movie. You've seen those bloopers with Kurt Russell? It's so good. He says it many times. Star War. Yeah, so we both weren't very excited for the film. And then we have to address it as well. Those initial reviews came out, and it got review bombed pretty hard.
Yeah.
But ignoring the ones that were obviously just review bombs and looking at the initial reviews, they pointed out problems with the pacing and exposition dumps. And that, I was wondering if that would be a problem. And as we arrived at the theaters, we were in line for popcorn. I looked at Nick and said, I don't think I'm excited for this movie.
No.
And it may be one of the few I've seen in theaters that I don't like.
But I said, I was like, it can't be as bad as
Yeah.
it's been bombed and just kind of, I was like, we're probably going to walk out of it and say, it's a good movie. It's not like our favorite or it's an amazing movie, but it's a good movie.
Yeah.
You know?
And our thoughts about what we truly think of the film will come a bit later. Let's get into the light spoilers of it now. So from this point on, light spoiler warning, and then when we get to the heavy spoiler stuff, we will let you know. So our light spoilers just sum it up like this. It's the story of how the Eternals were sent to Earth by the celestial Ereshim to protect the humans from the deviants. We're introduced to them as they arrive on Earth way back in 5000 BC. And each character has a part to play in their protecting of Earth. The Eternals are split into two groups. Half of them are warriors, and the other half are more like support characters, like healing and illusion projection and all that. They separated long ago because they believed they had eradicated all the deviants, but once the deviants return, they attempt to reunite to solve the problem. Now, this is the big difference. That is exactly what the trailer would have you believe the entire plot of the movie is. The trailers actually do a very good job of hiding the actual plot.
Yeah, the actual plot was a big surprise.
Yeah.
To be honest.
So we can't touch on it too much until the heavy spoilers, because it is quite...
It was quite the turn.
Twist, quite the twist. So the plot was a surprise. And Marvel does that pretty well, honestly. They make you think it's going to be about something, and then it's not.
Like, I remember walking to Spider-Man Far From Home, and you see Mysterio as the villain in the trailers and all that.
Yeah.
But you weren't expecting to be such a good guy throughout the movie.
Played up so well.
You know, you're like, maybe the trailers were just showing that he's actually a great guy or something like that, and then it gets to the end and you're like, oh, nuts, he's horrible.
What Far From Home does so well is it makes you want to believe him.
Yeah.
Because Jake Gyllenhaal has such a tremendous performance. You want to believe that he's a good guy.
But what I'm saying is, like, the trailers presented something, and it wasn't what we were expecting. So it's very much, as you said, Marvel does well.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to see. So now let's dive into the characters. Again, light spoilers. We're not going to get into the fates of anybody just yet, but we're going to talk about each character, how they were portrayed, who played them, and what we thought of them, and then identify our favorite and least favorite as they come up. So let's start with who is the lead character of the film, and that is Cersei, who is portrayed
actually
by Gemma
caught
Chan.
me off guard. I was not expecting her to be the main character.
No, the trailers wouldn't have you think that.
No, I thought it was going to be Icarus who was the main character.
And Icarus does have the second most screen time of any of the Eternals, but Cersei is definitely the focus. And a brief rundown on who she is: she's a very empathetic character who has a strong connection to the humans and Earth, of course. And her powers is she manipulates and transforms matter through physical contact. She's very much one of those supporter characters that I mentioned earlier. She's been in love with Icarus for centuries and has a strong connection with the Eternal Sprite. More on her later. And in the present day, she is a museum curator on Earth and dating Dane Whitman. Any comics fans out there, yes, that Dane Whitman. More on him later. And of course, Gemma Chan, who plays her, played Minerva in Captain Marvel back in 2019.
Now, I completely forgot about that when I was watching it. And then you mentioned to me after. I was like, oh, right. She was in Captain Marvel.
Yeah. For me, honestly, it was a little distracting, but I am a hardcore MCU fan. So even big fans wouldn't be distracted by it.
No.
It's just that special breed of above and beyond who'd be kind of like, okay, but why recast? But that's not to...
It's not a big problem.
No, and it's also not to insult Gemma Chan, who does a great job.
She did a great job.
Yeah. Her performance is very kind, and like all the empathy and everything, it doesn't feel fake, it doesn't feel forced. It's very legitimate empathy that she brings out really well.
Yeah.
And as the main character, it's through her eyes that we see the Eternals and their role in the universe as a whole. And we can't say too much more about that in this section, but we'll dive into that more with the heavy spoilers.
Oh.
Anything you want to add about Cersei?
You know, I wasn't expecting the turn of how she was played out throughout the film. I wasn't even expecting her to be the main character, so the whole thing was a surprise to me throughout her entire role. But, you know, it felt like a good lead character. You know?
Yeah.
I wasn't disappointed by it.
No, it was well written when it comes down to it, and that's the key to these movies.
Like, if I had been disappointed that, oh shoot, she's the main character and got let down by it, I would have been like, what the crap? Why would you not advertise the main character? And then it'd be so horrible that you find out someone else is the main character and all that. It's just like, okay.
Yeah. The one thing I will say is the Eternals was very much as big a gamble as Guardians of the Galaxy was back in Phase 2.
Yeah.
Whether it pays off or not in full, we'll talk about later, but it's the same thing that saved the Guardians was good writing for their characters.
Oh, yeah.
That really supports the Eternals.
A lot of the Eternals have amazing writing for them. I was caught off guard by that.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about the writing later, but for sure, the writing is very much definitely on par with the MCU standard. Like, it's great. So let's talk about number 2, Icarus. Richard Madden portrays Icarus, and he fully embraces his Scottish accent and heritage. He doesn't hide it at all.
I actually like the accent.
It
felt nice.
It was great. Brief recounting of who Icarus is. He can fly. You see him in the trailers. He can shoot cosmic energy beams from his eyes. He is Marvel's Superman because Hyperion's not in the MCU, so it's Icarus at the moment. Hyperion could come later, you never know. He is determined to fulfill his purpose. He's very honor-bound. He is one of the warriors of the Eternals. I have a partial quote from Madden when talking about the relationship between Icarus and Cersei, jotted down here. It says that they have a deep level of romance and are two opposing sides of how they connect with the world. Since Cersei has compassion for humans, while Icarus is more disconnected given the Eternals' long lifespan. So he's someone who's seen so many people come and go that he doesn't have that connection that some of the others have, and it's played up very well in the writing.
Oh, yeah.
That you understand that. What I really did like about Icarus is despite being Superman, with very similar powers, he doesn't feel OP.
No. He didn't feel like this unstoppable force that no one could stop.
And I think that's in big part to the threat the Deviants pose. Because they are, like the scene in the Amazon, the Deviants pose a strong threat and keep him busy. Like, it felt like when Superman fights the two henchmen of Zod and Man of Steel on the street.
Or when he was fighting Doomsday, Batman v Superman.
Yeah, like that. Which was pretty well done. I think Richard Madden had one of the best performances in the film. Because he really sells that, like, he wants to have that connection with Earth,
but
he can't.
yeah, there's too much other things he's focused on to have that connection.
Yeah. And then he sees Cersei, the person he loves, is deeply connected with Earth, and it's kind of like he's in this crossroads of like, how does he fit into the world now?
Yeah.
And it's very well done. Anything you wish to add about Icarus?
There wasn't too much else I can add besides it being heavy spoilers, I don't think.
Yeah, we'll talk more about all the characters in the heavy spoiler section, their fates and whatnot. So let's talk about Kingo. I've been practicing saying the actor's name, but we'll see if I get it right. Kumail Nanjiani.
The last name sounds correct. I don't know about the first. I haven't heard it. But I do
Kumail?
like this actor. This actor's pretty fun.
Yes, he is a stand-up comedian who if you don't know his name, you've probably seen his face many, many times.
Oh, yeah.
I know I have. So who Kingo is, he is an Eternal who projects cosmic energy from his hands. He's enamored with fame and became a popular Bollywood film star in order to blend in on Earth. He's definitely one of the warriors. So just speaking a bit about seeing his face everywhere is, I had seen his face so many times, but I had not seen him in anything until the 2019 reboot of The Twilight Zone. And then from there, it seems like I've seen him in quite a few things. Like most recently, I watched Men in Black International, where he voiced the little alien that I don't remember the name of, because it wasn't the best movie I've ever seen.
I remember watching that movie. I can't remember anything from it.
Yeah. But from what I've seen him in recently, and also in commercials and just knowing a bit about him, this is by far the best performance I've seen from him. And I admit it's not much, but it was a really good performance.
I really enjoyed his character. It very much felt like a more humanized character, but like with cosmic powers.
Yeah, it's kind of like, while Cersei is empathetic to humans, Kingo just threw himself into the culture.
Oh, yeah.
Integrated into society at the highest level he could.
And I like little jokes they throw in because of their lifespan and everything.
Yeah, like with the, they never question how you never age. It's like, no, I'm part of a long dynasty of my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father, and me. And I really do think that he is very interesting and surprisingly complex.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, because when you see the character and you know he's a stand-up comedian, you don't necessarily expect the level of complexity and motivation than what you get from him, and especially towards the climax of the movie. More on that a bit later. Anything else you want to add?
You know, I really like his powers. You know, when you literally play those imaginative games and shoot stuff from your fingers, you know, your finger guns, you know, it gave me that type of feeling, because he's like charging up and he's like pew, you know, pew, you know, it felt powerful coming off.
Yeah, and then like in the one scene where he like combines them both into a bigger ball, and it's
like, oh, it's like my imaginary. You know?
Yeah. So let's talk about Sprite. Sprite is an Eternal who projects lifelike illusions. She has the physical appearance of a 12-year-old child. She's one of the supporter characters. Kingo points out her story arc and describes it very well as she is Tinkerbell to Icarus's Pan and Cersei's Wendy. And just in case you don't understand that reference, Tinkerbell loves Pan, but Pan loves Wendy, and Tinkerbell can never be with Pan.
Which felt a little...
It's used to create tension in the film, the romantic tension. And I want to establish before I get into it that Leah McHugh, the actress, she gives a good performance with what she was given. I'm not trashing on a child actor, but her character wasn't very well written, in my opinion. And it's no fault of hers.
I think this is my least favorite character.
My least favorite as well.
I never enjoyed her in the movie. It just felt like you're trying to have this 12-year-old child want to be an adult the entire time.
Yeah.
While being stuck in this major conflict of a movie.
Yeah, she is just not as interesting or developed, in my opinion. No fault of the actress. I want to establish that. When I have a problem with an actor's performance, I am not above saying it. But
there was
It just
nothing
didn't
wrong
do
with
it.
the actor's performance. It was just
The writing of the character wasn't good.
And hearing the name Sprite, you know, I kept thinking, are they trying to grab a drink or something? And it's just the character. And I'm like, oh, never mind.
Jerryofdom really loves Sprite.
Favorite pop, it's best.
Root beer, but
Root beer vanilla is really good. Have you had that?
back when McDonald's allowed the customizing, yes,
Yeah.
it was pretty good.
I like root
You
beer.
remember back when McDonald's let you have
I
free
know.
reign? That was
And
great.
then they got rid of it.
Yeah,
and I
they
was like,
revamped everything and got rid of all the cool stuff.
yeah, I was like, okay,
Except now you can get extra cheese curds on your poutine.
you know,
We're in Canada, by the way.
no, I don't eat poutine.
I know, because you're sucky.
And I also not a big fan of cheese, as we found out today.
Yeah, yeah. I don't have anything else I want to say about Sprite.
No, it
She
wasn't too much.
didn't bring much to the film. Anything else is going to be in heavy spoilers for
Yeah.
me. So let's talk about Fastos, played by Brian Tyree Henry.
Yeah.
He is an eternal and intelligent weapons and technology inventor. He is the first gay superhero in the MCU. He is one of the supporting characters. So, in today's climate, if you're going to include a gay character, it's going to ruffle feathers one way or another.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like, if it's done campy and for comedy, it's going to ruffle the LGBTQ community. Or if it's kind of ignored, it's going to make them angry. And no matter what you do, it's some side's going to be upset.
But I felt he was done really well with that.
What I saw with Fastos that I've not really seen with other films that include a gay character is they treated him as a character who is gay, not that his character is that he is gay.
Yeah, his whole personality wasn't around that. It was, he is just someone trying to protect his family, and that really helps him to proceed with a lot of things.
Yeah.
And that one scene when they're in his house was pretty funny, I'm not gonna lie.
There was amusing parts.
There's amusing parts.
And it's done well, that it's tasteful.
Yeah.
And the performance of the character with the, as you mentioned, the ties to protecting his family, he brings a good amount of emotion to that. I think will really resonate with audiences in today's climate world.
And he was definitely a funny character. There wasn't like,
Mm.
he didn't feel like tacked on humor.
No.
No.
He's in it a lot less than I think most people are expecting, though.
Yeah. He comes near the second half of the film.
Well, you see him in flashbacks at the beginning and such, but they don't really see him in the present until essentially the start of the third act is when they finally bring him in the present day. But there's a lot of characters this movie is trying to juggle.
Yeah.
Anything you wish to add?
No.
All right, so let's talk about your favorite. Let's talk about Makari, played by Lauren Ridloff. She is an Eternal who can move at superhuman speed, and it is also the first deaf superhero in the MCU.
I thought that was like that surprised me. I wasn't expecting that.
Well, this movie is really all about inclusion with Fastos and deaf superhero and Makari, and we have our first Korean superhero we're going to talk about later. We've got Scottish and Irish, and
There's a big mix of things.
It's all over the place. And I don't say that as a bad thing.
No.
There's a lot of representation, like the same feelings you get from Shang-Chi. Yeah. More on that later.
When I see the movie.
So she's one of the warriors, and she may be the fastest character I've ever seen in a live-action film. I would definitely put her faster than Pietro and Joss Whedon's take on The Flash and Justice League.
Yeah.
And I would say that the closest I've seen, and who I'd want to see a race between, is Christopher Reeve's Superman, Snyder's Flash, and Evan Peters' Quicksilver.
I honestly think that Snyder's Flash would win. That's how I feel.
And that's fair.
Because, like, the Flash does going through the timelines, going so fast that he just split through time like it's nothing.
True.
So.
But isn't the Flash's whole thing that he moves at the speed of sound?
He moves faster than that.
Because that's what Makari's power is. She's faster than the speed of sound. I know everyone and everybody is asking about who's the fastest. I've seen lots of quotes from the director, from Lauren Ridloff herself. that Makari is the fastest, but there will probably never be a solid answer to that.
There's a lot of debating around how fast she is.
But what we do see from her speed is incredible.
And it wasn't used. There was no slow motion used for her. A lot of speedsters, it's like.
Well, there was a bit of slow motion. You could actually see her, but
Well, like a few times, but it
wasn't like an Evan Peters sequence.
Yeah,
where
right.
which are the best parts of those movies, but
yeah. But I liked it. Felt different than other speedsters that they've done in movies, where it wasn't just a lot of time slow. It was like, wow, this is how fast they're moving to everyone else. This is like,
yeah. We're going to talk about that a bit more with the effects, because there's one thing about her, one sequence I really do want to talk about. Also, just in case anyone's wondering, real sign language is used in the film, as Lauren Ridloff is in fact deaf herself, and she has to communicate through sign language. So characters like Kingo and Druig, who we'll talk about in a little bit, they actually learn signs in order to communicate with her. And I also read an on-set story of how they got Lauren Ridloff to know her cues, because she couldn't hear the actors talking, is Angelina Jolie, who plays Thena, would actually signal her every time it was her cue. And they didn't tell anyone that's how they were doing. And it took the director a long time to figure out how she knew exactly when to jump in, until one time she saw Angelina Jolie signal her. That's a nice story.
But the sign language, I was surprised. But I also like how her character, because they include like deaf, but she can also sense vibrations and stuff.
Yeah, and read lips and all
like
that.
She can know what people are saying, like her character can, because she can feel the vibration of someone's voice, and she can actually sense someone's going to move before they move.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting, because they don't really do that with characters too often with vibration and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like I mentioned it. I know I mentioned it, but I want to touch on a little bit more. Is that the fact that Lauren Ridloff was born deaf, and that they're using her, is that you can tell the difference between someone who isn't deaf and is using sign language, and someone who is, and it all comes down to the facial expressions.
Oh, yeah.
On a deaf person, the facial expressions are so much more emotive, and it has, because a huge part of sign language is the emotion you're portraying. And she does it really well.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no disconnect of not being able to understand what she's signing, because it does use captions for those who don't know sign language. And it really just adds depth to her.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really well done. They didn't shy away from it. They didn't have someone like she signed and someone translates it out loud. No, they put words up there that she's talking.
She wasn't in the movie as much.
No, she might have the second least amount of screen time of the Eternals.
It'd be the second least.
Second or third. She doesn't really come in until they go to their ship in the present day. That's where they find her.
And that's after they've collected everybody too.
Yeah, she's the last stop.
Yeah.
More on that a bit later. Anything you wish to add about your favorite in the film?
No.
Why is she your favorite?
Super speed has always been my favorite, so having a character with super speed just instantly made me like them.
So let's talk about Druig, portrayed by Barry Keoghan, I think is how that's pronounced. It's Irish. He is an aloof Eternal who can manipulate the minds of others. He is one of the supporting characters. Unfortunately for me, he's one of the more one-note characters in the film, but that's because his powers of controlling other people's minds, it lends to a standoffish character. And Barry Keoghan, or however you actually say his name, I'm so sorry, he nails that portrayal of standoffish and quiet. And there is really no way the character could have been done differently, but I did find him, as a result, more boring than a lot of his other co-stars.
He wasn't one that I was like, oh boy. No, he was just kind of like, he's there.
Yeah, it's not that he's a bad character by any means.
We just weren't that interested in him, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's just straight up, it's just a result of his powers and who he is results in him being less engaging, I guess.
Yeah. His attitude's very aggressive with a lot of the Eternals, I found.
Yep, but it fits as well.
It does fit, but it's like...
It serves the story well, but not the character, I would
No.
say.
Though there were a few scenes at the end of the movie that I didn't find entertaining with them.
For sure. Anything else about Druig?
No.
Alright, so let's talk about Gilgamesh.
Your favorite.
My favorite. Portrayed by Don Lee. He is advertised as the strongest Eternal, whether that just means physically or overall power. I'm inclined to think physically, but hey, if they want to say overall power, I'm not going to complain.
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised
Yeah.
if it was power, because they did kind of show him as like
standing up to deviants one-on-one.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
like it took in the London scene, took Sprite confusing the one for Icarus to get the jump on it. Meanwhile, they find Gilgamesh's house with one already dead that
Yeah.
he just took on by himself.
Yeah.
But more on that a bit later. He has a deep connection with Athena, who he mentions Angelina Jolie. And then I got a reference from Wikipedia about Don Lee here. He pursued the role in order to be an inspiration to the younger generations as the first Korean superhero. So we're coming off of Shang-Chi with our first Chinese superhero with Simu Liu. And now we have Don Lee with the first Korean superhero. And he's definitely one of the warriors. Can't figure that
Oh
out.
yeah, definitely.
And his chemistry with Angelina Jolie is so good.
They make it like
Yeah.
really.
I've seen so many memes where it's like the ship that Kevin Feige wants us to believe in, and it's Cersei and Icarus. The ship we all believe in, and it's Gilgamesh and Athena.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, 100%. Now, Angelina Jolie, she has great chemistry with pretty much everyone she's put into a romantic role with. But with Gilgamesh, it really shines. And why the chemistry is so believable is they don't have to say too much to each other.
No.
And it just feels like this old married couple, because they've been together for thousands of years.
Because after they all split up, he took her with him.
Yeah. They were together all that time. So they feel like this old married couple where they don't have to say much. There's just the looks and the glances, and it feels so good. What I really enjoy about Gilgamesh is, despite being an absolute powerhouse, he is so kind.
And he feels so tied down.
Yeah, he's like this centering force of logic. He's very kind and caring and just quiet too. Like, he's not shouting.
No.
He's just quiet, and I love it.
I still remember when they come to him and he's making the pie.
The pie.
And then they kind of tell him what's going on, and he drops the pie.
Yeah.
I was so upset.
I liked when you looked over at me when he reached into the fire with no oven to grab the iron. You're like so shocked. I'm like, well, he don't
I'm like,
need no
he's
glove.
gonna burn his hand.
He don't need no glove. Yeah, it is amazing. It's my favorite. It's so funny as well. Anything you want to add?
No, but I really enjoyed him in the movie.
Gilgamesh is great. So now let's talk about Athena. Athena, Angelina Jolie. Obviously, in case I haven't figured out, a lot of these characters are the basis of human mythology.
Yeah.
Like Athena is Athena, the goddess of war. Gilgamesh, the epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia. So Athena is an elite warrior who can form any weapon out of cosmic energy and has a very close bond with Gilgamesh. She is one of the warriors. And I just want to start straight up by saying Angelina Jolie is fantastic.
Yep.
Always.
Oh, yeah.
And this was no different.
No.
This isn't like a leading role for her, but she really owns the character. And it's almost like you can't picture anyone else playing Athena.
No. She does that good of a job where it's
Yeah.
like she must stay.
Yeah.
And I think another thing, because like the role I know her best as is her playing Salt. And that movie was tremendously good. I really enjoyed it. Wish there's a sequel. But it's like that was a completely different movie from this one, but she forms her role so good where it doesn't feel, like she can just go from role to role, which most actors can. But this one feels like this has only been her character,
Yeah. Like, there could never be another Athena. I think her role in the film and the depth of her character is very much surprised that the trailers don't indicate the type
No.
of performance that she would give.
She felt like she was just going to be this warrior who was the most powerful out of all.
Almost like her Lara Croft or
Yeah.
Tigress roles.
Oh, yeah.
But she's so much deeper
Oh, yeah.
than that. And I've seen Angelina Jolie in quite a few things, and this is honestly my favorite performance from her. This is just so well done. And her powers are cool.
Yeah.
Forming any sort of weapon she can think of, melee weapon, out of cosmic energy. It's so cool. Anything you wish to add about Athena?
No.
Alright, so let's talk about Ajak, the final Eternal to talk about here. She is their leader, Salma Hayek, of course. Her ability is to heal, and she is the bridge between the Eternals and Celestials. What that means is she is the only one who can talk to Erishim and relay what he wants. She's one of the supporters, and I feel like a good spot to start talking about her is that it's a very bold choice to not have the leader be the lead character in the film.
Yeah, I was expecting her, Icarus, to
Yeah.
be combined as like the main characters.
It's like picture
But-
Guardians of the Galaxy when Star-Lord is not the lead character.
Yeah.
No,
And-
not to say that she's like Star-Lord, but you get the point.
Yeah, but I was even surprised she has so little screen time.
Yeah.
It's not what you're expecting at all.
No, but it does work.
Yeah.
It suits the story. Her performance has that motherly side to her that it makes her role, though a bit smaller, feel important. It's like we are watching her kids with her.
Yeah.
Is what it feels like. So it's like the story's about her kids, not the mother. Of course, with Salma Hayek, you kind of always want more.
Oh, yeah.
But she is the only actress so far and actor that is confirmed to be signed on for multiple Marvel projects. So,
Which surprised me.
yeah, well, we could see more of her in the future.
Yeah.
She's signed on for multiple, so
Yeah.
I don't have too much else to say. The next few are going to be pretty short because now we're getting into, after the Eternals, we're into the supporting cast, really.
Yeah.
Anything you wish to add about
No, not
Ajak?
too much to add about it.
So let's try to avoid spoilers and talk about Crow. Crow is the Deviant leader. So the Deviants as a whole, they look really cool.
Oh, yeah.
The effects on them are great.
Oh.
I didn't mute my phone because I'm a professional.
Clearly.
Um,
This is going great. But, yeah, I don't like how he looked near the end of the film, but most of the film he looks pretty good.
yeah, I was the Deviants as a whole with like their almost like rainbow scale pattern, though it's subtle, looks really nice. So what can we say about Crow without revealing too much? Trailer shows Crow speaking, and it's established early in the movie that he can't talk then, so you kind of see where it's going, and you see him evolve throughout the film into
Yeah.
the being you see at the end. So he has his own little arc going on as what's the leader of the Deviants. I mean, like, he's like the main villain they throw in your face in the trailers. He's the
Yeah.
big guy.
Not so much in the actual movie, though.
Yeah, so more on that later. Bill Skarsgård, Pennywise from It,
Yeah.
he voiced the character for all of about 5 lines.
Yep.
And as such, there's not too much to know about his performance.
No.
It wasn't
Is he
bad.
in anything else? Because I feel like there's something else.
He's been in a lot of things, but I think Pennywise is his big claim to
Yeah,
fame.
I don't want to watch that.
Yeah, I haven't watched it either.
No, I'm okay never watching that.
Yeah, so nothing against Bill Skarsgård. He has a fine performance, but there's just nothing.
Interviews
that's
I've watched him are pretty entertaining.
Yeah. There's just nothing to really establish it as like, oh, his performance
Yeah,
was so
there was
good.
nothing out of this world.
It's got maybe 5 lines in the
Yeah.
film. So let's talk about Karun.
Oh, this guy's great.
Played by Harish Patel. He is
Hilarious.
the human character with the most screen time.
Oh, yeah.
He is Kingo's valet as the Bollywood star. And he actually, though he is so funny, he actually serves a very specific purpose in the film as he is the human that is with the group. So he's essentially us in this story, as the Eternals are these everlasting beings dealing with higher things and bigger problems, and then it's the human connection. It's like when you have human characters in Transformers.
Oh.
Except
Except not made the main focus.
yeah, it's how they should be done.
Yeah.
The Eternals are what I love is when they're arguing about these high concept things, and then there's Karim just kind of like, okay, what about humans?
I hope humans survive it already.
Yeah, yeah, and he is so funny.
But he has some very serious scenes in it. And
Like his
much...
final monologue
yeah.
is so good. But the main thing that the MCU sometimes struggles with is when to throw in comedic timing, and that is absolutely not a problem with Karuk.
He's done great.
His comedic relief points are perfect.
Like when they're in the Amazon, he keeps pulling out cameras,
Yeah,
and they keep destroying the cameras.
So good.
How many cameras do you have, man?
Always bring backups. It's so good. He is. I put him on the same tier of supporting MCU roles as the three wombats from Ant-Man, Luis, Kurt, and Dave.
Yeah.
I put him up there with all of these amazing characters that make the MCU film so special. Like even Kraglin in Guardians of the Galaxy. He's just so good.
He fit perfectly.
Yeah, it's great. So let's now talk about Dane Whitman.
Yeah.
Yes, that is that Dane Whitman. We're not going to talk too much about him until the heavy spoilers point. He's portrayed by Kit Harington. I know him from How to Train Your Dragon 2 and 3. The world knows him from Game of Thrones. I haven't seen it.
No.
So he is a human.
Who's he playing How to Train Your Dragons?
He was Eret, the dragon hunter who ends up helping them.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think I remember. It's been a while since I watched the movies.
So he's
Wait, does he play the guy that liked Hiccup's mom?
I don't remember if that was part of it. I know Ruffnut really likes him.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking of.
That same guy, okay. So he is a human, just a human, who works at the Natural History Museum in London as a professor and is dating Cersei when the movie begins. You can already see where that's going with Icarus and Cersei. And his performance is great. He's this everyman type of performance who everyone can kind of get behind as he's trying to understand everything. But he's not in it much.
No.
I feel like people were expecting him to be in it a lot more based on the trailers.
I thought he was going to be one of the Eternals by the trailers.
Yeah, no, he's not in it much at all. But as for what his role truly is in the film, we'll talk about that later. But I do want to give a special shout out to him wanting to be a giraffe. That was a funny recurring joke. And now let's talk about Airship. So, if anyone listening here is a viewer of the Gmod squad or knows me personally, they know I am a huge fan of Transformers and their voice actors. And David freaking K, Beast Wars Megatron, makes a huge splash in this film as the Celestial Airship. Insert obligatory.
And we didn't even realize it was him until we were watching the credits. And then we were like...
That's the sign of a good voice actor. That's the thing. David K is not a celebrity voice actor. He's not Robin Williams doing the Genie. He's not Jack Black doing Poe. His life is voice acting, so he can disguise and change his voice so well. It is so well done. So before I keep obsessing over David K, Arishem is the Celestial who sent the Eternals to Earth. And boy, is he... I think he's got the best effects in the whole film.
He is a menacing being. He was
it's not just the design. Like, the CGI serves him so well.
Oh, yeah. It's like a lot of the budget definitely went there.
It feels like how good Thanos looked.
Yeah.
Like, it was great. He is a sight to behold. Just the scale of the character. He makes a huge impression. David K's voice is always epic, and he really brings the character to life. To the point where I don't think there's anyone else who could have voiced Airship. No. But more on his role in the film a bit later. But David K, big fan. Whoop whoop. If you ever see this, big fan. So let's get into more of the technical aspects now as we're through the characters. So let's talk about the effects and the cinematography. As we've mentioned with the characters, a lot of the effects with them are really good. Some of the special effects are a little lackluster at times.
Like sometimes in the fights, the CGI will look a little iffy. You know,
as a whole, the effects are solid.
There's only one part in the movie where I felt it was as bad as when you watch like the end fight Black Panther scene when they're falling down. And it's like, oh my goodness, what am I watching?
Yeah, it didn't look great.
There's only one part where I felt like, and then there's a few others where it's like, but most of the time it's really good.
We've already said a lot about Arishem and the Deviants. We talked about Icarus's flight and his combat was looking mostly good. I will point out that there is one shot where they're in the Amazon and Icarus is flying towards the trees that looks very bad.
Yeah.
It's a brief shot, maybe 3 to 5 seconds, but it doesn't look good. And you commented on the shot of the Eternals ship at the end of the movie was
Yeah,
It
it
was pretty
just
bad.
looks like someone took like a paper airplane and started moving it with their hands and then animated it
it was pretty bad.
in like a high school movie.
I also want to point out that the CGI animals in the Babylon flashback, the bulls and such, did not look good.
Yeah,
There's another really bad effect that we can't talk
that's
about
the one
at this
I was
point.
kind of talking about.
Yeah.
That's like, oh my
We
goodness.
can't even say that name
No.
yet, but we're going to talk about that in heavy spoilers, but it was really bad.
Yeah,
So let's address the elephant in the room as far as cinematography goes.
it's so unnecessary of a scene.
The sex scene between Icarus and Cersei.
I was like, why is this here?
It just feels out of place and awkward.
It doesn't feel like it should be in here.
No.
No.
It's
A lot of kids
unnecessary.
watch Marvel movies, so I was like, I don't know how I feel about this.
I don't have a problem with characters getting intimate.
But we don't need to see it.
It can be done in a tasteful way.
But it was not done in a tasteful way.
No.
It was very much like, hey, look, they're holding hands in the city. Oh, they're in the sand.
Yeah, it wasn't
He is
great.
gyrating.
Yeah. Also, just for cinematography notes, the Amazon fight sequence at times was too dark to tell what was happening.
Yeah.
Which obviously fit the move as like it was a little too dark. And there's also one sequence in there where we can't talk about much about what the effect was, but there was an extended slow motion sequence of water splashing that really seemed like, why is this sequence going on for so long? There's nothing to see here. It's just water going towards the camera.
And it's like, what's happening?
Yeah, it's like, why? But to praise some effects of cinematography, Makari racing around the world,
That was a good scene.
it showed off her speed. Like, you could see how incredibly fast she was moving, but you could still see what was happening without the use of slow motion.
Yeah.
Like, they slowed it down a bit, but they didn't slow it down to, like, the Flash and Superman turning and looking at him, or Evan Peters scene. It was really, really well done.
Yeah.
You could tell what was happening. You could tell where she was. It was great. Anything you want to add?
The final fight sequence in the movie, I felt was really well done.
A little too spread out, in my opinion.
There was
for
a
where
few-
the events were happening, but
Yeah.
it was still very
The
solid.
fights were pretty good, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And when a few heavy spoilers were happening,
Yeah.
coming out of things, I was like, oh, that actually looks pretty good.
Yeah. Heavy spoilers is coming soon. We just want to talk about the writing and score, and then we'll be on to the heavy spoilers where we get into the meat of this and what it means for the MCU. So this is our final light spoiler topic, the writing and the score. As we mentioned, the writing interaction between the Eternals was pretty good. It was mostly solid. There were a couple things that were kind of like, okay, which is mostly Sprite interacting with anybody.
Yeah.
Except her interaction with Gilgamesh were nice, actually.
Yeah.
I've said it many times, I love Gilgamesh and Athena's interactions, but also Icarus and Kingo have a cool dynamic. Kingo and Sprite with the Tinkerbell scene was cool. Phastos and Icarus at the climax of the film had a really cool little interaction. Gilgamesh and Kingo as well in their house was great. And Ajak and Icarus has a multi-level dynamic that is really cool to see.
There's a lot of hidden things that you weren't expecting.
Yeah. Also, give a shout out for not the Eternals interacting, but Cersei and Dane's interactions felt very like heartfelt and funny. I just want to establish that Icarus and Cersei is not a badly written relationship, but the chemistry is not the same as with other famous MCU relationships like Pepper and Tony, Steve
There
and
didn't
Peggy,
feel like an actual
Gilgamesh and
connection
Athena,
there.
Ant-Man and the Wasp.
It
Gamora
wasn't
and
when you were
Star-Lord.
like, oh boy, that's what I want. It was like,
it's Gilgamesh and Athena,
hey,
the old boy.
it's here.
Gilgamesh and Athena is the old boy. That's what I want.
And then they did kind of sneak in the, I'm forgetting names right now. Mind control dude.
Druig and Makari.
In the car.
There's some hints for that.
Yeah.
A little bit of a romantic tension.
Yeah.
Writing letdown Sprite, we already talked about that. So let's talk about the score a bit.
I never felt much with the score. I wasn't paying attention to it, to be honest.
I loved the main theme. It sounded so unique that it made me have a feeling to it that I hadn't felt since Black Panther's main theme.
Oh yeah.
Like, obviously it's not as grand, but it has like a cool instrumentation that is like it uses an instrument that I think, because they were trying to fit the time period, I think it was from ancient Babylon. But you're like, you hear this, what instrument is that? That is a cool little I really liked it. The score for the rest of the movie was general MCU fare, but the main theme tends to be where there's the most differentiation.
Yeah.
And I actually quite liked it. It's not one of my like absolute favorites, but it had a unique feel to it. I'm like, that's cool. So let's talk a bit more about the writing and address what a lot of people were complaining about. The exposition dumps.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad. Yeah, those complaints.
Some didn't feel as bad as others,
True,
but
true.
a lot felt unnecessary.
The complaints were warranted when it comes to that.
There's a lot of things where it's like, okay, so why are we viewing this?
That
You could have presented
to go
this
on.
in a whole different area.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a way that some of it could have been done better, but I also believe that you need to let the audience figure some things out themselves.
I feel like what they could have done better is not actually showing us why the Eternals broke up, or showing it in a better manner than they did.
Could have just revealed it through dialogue, I think.
Yeah.
And that would have been interesting.
Because the way it was, it just felt very messy. I was like, this is how they're splitting up? This doesn't seem...
The first bit was okay, but when it got into Druig's part, though it was great acting for Druig, it was just... scene felt like it went on too long.
I was like, okay.
Yeah. Everything was spelled out. And then some things that should have been spelled out weren't.
No.
Like the Mad Weary, which we'll talk about a bit later. Really needed some sort of better explanation for that one.
I can't remember what that is.
And the flashbacks, the constant use of flashbacks does make the film seem cluttered and convoluted at times.
And there's like scenes that don't need to be presented. Yeah. They're like, okay. But I'm just making the runtime longer with this.
Yeah. But I do want to say that it is not as bad as some of the reviews would have you believe. It's not good, but it's not that
It wasn't something that would be like, I want to walk out of this movie because I am so lost. It was like, okay, it's a bit of a bother, but I can deal with it. This is something that I can live with.
All right. The time you've been waiting for is here.
Yeah, 52 minutes later.
Oh, it's a podcast.
Yeah.
Warning! Warning! We are headed into heavy spoiler territory.
$10, no one understands that.
You can understand that?
I can understand that.
I feel like it'll be fine.
It should be.
We're into heavy spoilers now.
Like,
so we're
big
gonna
script.
Yeah. We're gonna talk about the major aspects of the plot and also talk about them, and then talk about the surprises and the future of the MCU as presented here. So let's start with the big one. The Eternals' actual mission is to preserve the human population so that they can be sacrificed to power up the celestial Tiamat, who is growing in the earth. Let that sink in.
So
that's the actual plot. The Eternals are technically the bad guys at the start of the film, although they don't know it. They don't know that.
No.
They are also robots, essentially. Yeah. That's quite the surprise.
And even in the comics, they weren't like robots. They were like organic beings. And in this one,
while they still are kind of organic,
like they'd get stabbed and there'd be blood on the weapon from them. But then it's like, you're a robot.
A super advanced robot created by Arishin.
Yeah.
So Thanos in Infinity War, when he snapped away half the population, he delayed the awakening of Tiamat because the human population had to reach a certain point for there to be enough to be sacrificed for Tiamat to awaken. So Thanos snapped away actually delayed that. So hashtag Thanos did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Just
Thanos was the good guy.
Wrong.
But you know what? That also what I feel is with the Thanos doing that. Maybe his motives were more towards, because if he was a born Eternal, then maybe he.
That's the risk they're running right now.
Yeah.
Is undercutting one of the greatest villains in cinema history.
But either way, his motives are still good.
Sure.
Just in a more psychopathic way.
Yeah. So let's now talk about the timeline. It is heavily implied by Ajax that the events of the movie take place either 1 to 3 weeks after Endgame.
Yeah.
So despite everything that's about to come to light with what we're about to tell you about this movie, it's still not the furthest of the MCU we've seen.
No.
And once you know that, well, there's not going to be anything too drastic. And yet there is, and it just hasn't been addressed in Falcon the Winter Soldier, or Spider-Man Far From Home, or Shang-Chi, or any of these things that take place after.
WandaVision.
Well, WandaVision, I think, is
okay, that one's
probably happening concurrently, I would say.
Yeah, but there's a lot of things that like aren't pointed out that should most definitely be pointed out. But I also feel like because we did discuss it after watching the movies with COVID throwing all the movies, they shouldn't have moved.
They shouldn't have changed the release order of things.
Because that's probably why they cut a lot of things from certain movies and stuff to not be like, so there's a giant thing somewhere.
Yeah, that's
like,
gonna be. We'll have to see what happens with that. And while we're on the topic of what Ajax revealed, let's talk a bit about Salma Hayek's character of Ajax. She is dead by the time we get to the present day.
Yeah, she's just dead.
Yeah, she dies before the movie technically starts. Not counting the flashbacks, she is already dead.
Yeah.
The movie takes place 6 days after her death, and you only learn that about 20 to 30 minutes in the movie. So you see her in flashbacks, and then she's dead.
Yeah. And you know what? Okay.
It felt so abrupt to cast Salma Hayek in that role, and then for her to be dead. And then why is she the only one who's been signed on for multiple movies? If she's dead, are we getting a what if?
I think the big thing is because they are robots, they can come back to life.
Too, is can they
but
be
I'm
rebuilt?
like, she wouldn't have any of her memories, so it'd be like
It'd be
a new character.
But it could still be Salma Hayek.
It still, yeah, that still works. But it's like this feels strange.
Yeah. So with her death, as we mentioned, she is the conduit between Arishem and the Eternals. With her death, Cersei becomes that person who is connected to Arishem, and she learns the truth of their origin, the robots, and their mission to make sure Earth is destroyed and humanity upon it. And she becomes determined to find the others to stop Tiamat to protect the people of Earth, humans. So that's the actual plot of the movie, and the trailers did a great job of hiding it. It really did.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, it did a great job of hiding it. So let's get into some more details. In a flashback to Babylon, we learn that with the Deviants destroyed, the Eternals got into an argument and split up. As for exactly what the argument is, you go ahead and watch the movie. This is heavy spoilers. We're not going to tell you everything. We're not going to sit here for 2 hours and 37 minutes and recount the entire movie for you.
Why not?
Because no,
Okay.
That's why. Druig leaves with some people. He mind controls them and takes them away.
And then they live in the Amazon.
Yeah, and the reason why he disagrees is he disagrees with the non-interference with humans if deviants aren't involved.
Yeah.
So the Eternals are there to protect humans from the deviants, but human-on-human conflict, don't interfere. And Druig does not agree with that.
No.
Which is great character moment.
Oh, yeah. It definitely felt like...
He never reached that high again of that scene. Like, yeah, the scene went on too long, but it's like, give us those scenes separately or only give us one of them.
Yeah.
And if you're only giving us one, give us the Druig one.
And then when you run into him again in present time,
He's such a jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. So another reason for their falling out is Thena is losing her mind from what they call the Mad Weary.
Oh, that's what it was.
And that really needed better explanation than just she had too many memories, but we'll get into that a little bit more later. So she's losing her mind, and the only way to prevent her from harming everyone is to wipe her memories away. Gilgamesh, who is the only one powerful enough to stop her, volunteers to stay with her and take her where she cannot harm anyone else, and the rest of the group splits up on Ajax's wishes. Except for it's implied Icarus stayed with Ajax for at least part of it.
Yeah.
Like he went with Cersei and then came back, or something like that.
Something weird.
Yeah. So... Crow, as we get to present day, Crow attacks Cersei and Sprite and Dane, who are all in London, England. And during the fight, he uses Ajax's healing powers, the exact same motion and effects, to heal himself. Where it's revealed that he absorbed her power after her death. Icarus survives, he fights Crow off and forces him to retreat.
But he kind of loses.
He loses a lot. It takes everyone there to kind of get Crow to leave.
Yeah.
And he does retreat. They then go to try and find Ajax, find her dead body, and deduce that Crow has taken her powers. So the next person they go to get is they go to recruit Kingo, and his valet Karun goes with them. And Kingo wants to create a documentary of the Eternals, as the world has now had the Thanos event, the Avengers, so it's no longer really a need to hide. So Karun has many cameras, as we mentioned, filming this documentary. So their next stop is to find Gilgamesh and Thena, and when they arrive, as I mentioned, you see that Gilgamesh has already killed a deviant by himself.
Yeah.
Thena is still losing her mind, and it's revealed that she has memories of her dying on an exploding world.
Yeah. And she has a lot of drawings, and some of them
depicting this thing of celestials.
Yeah, and they also show what's his face in it, Arishem.
Yeah.
I'm not doing great with names. A lot of these names are just like,
that's okay.
Oh boy.
Their next stop is to get Druig, and he is hard to convince to join them. They find him in the Amazon. Crow and a few other deviants attack them. This is where Cersei, that weird slow motion water segment, it should have been focused on what she was doing, as she manages to turn a deviant into wood.
A tree.
By touching it.
Turns
She
into
panicked,
a
and
looking tree.
They point out that she could never do that before.
Yeah.
And now for the big bombshell, Gilgamesh is killed by Crow in the Amazon, protecting Thena.
That was pretty upsetting.
I was so sad. I teared up, especially with Thena crying over his body. And Crow absorbs his powers, giving him now the ability to speak. Screw you, Crow.
And he also looks very weird looking after that. Less like an animal, more like a
person. Yeah. Yeah, I was very upset. Thena becomes determined to remember who she is. That is Gilgamesh's final words: remember who you are, and not to succumb to that mad weird. So the explanation we do get is that she's remembering their previous times bringing celestials, like birthing them and wiping out planets, and her memory wipes weren't as effective as the others.
No.
Really needed more information on that.
Yeah.
This is when they go to their ship where they reunite with Makari. Meanwhile, Phastos had given up on humanity because he was responsible for technological advancements, and they chose to show that through Hiroshima.
Yeah,
the bombing at the end of World War II. And that was a bad decision. The criticism for that scene is very justified. It's in poor taste and just bad.
Yeah, that was...
Could have showed it any other amount of ways, but that's the one they chose. Sure, it has impact. I don't know why
it does.
But it does have impact.
It has a lot of impact, but it's like...
Yeah.
This feels strange.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel right.
As I mentioned when we were driving home, it's that thing of you want your movies to be set in like an alternate universe where the world is a little different.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have to acknowledge all the horrors.
Yeah.
But they're like, nah.
We're gonna
horror
acknowledge this one, and it's like, okay.
Yeah. So that the criticism for that is worth it.
Yeah.
So his whole motivation is to protect his family, and he takes up arms to stop Tiamat's birth. Their plan is essentially to have Druig take control of the Celestial's mind. Yeah, this was legitimately their plan. And put him to sleep so that they can evacuate the planet and then let him wake up so they can have the best of both worlds. Humanity would survive and Tiamat would still wake up to birth billions of other peoples, what like Celestials do. Yeah. That was literally their plan, though.
Colonize Mars. Just call up Elon Musk. Maybe we'll figure something out.
Yeah. So Icarus doesn't like the plan, as he is duty-bound to Arishem in his assignment. So that's then revealed that Icarus went to Ajax and found out that Ajax also wanted to save humanity, and Icarus murders her by feeding her to Crow and the Deviants, essentially sparking the power of Crow and killing Gilgamesh. Screw you, Icarus. That's what all comes down to for me. Screw you, Icarus, and me, screw you, Crow. Yeah, so Icarus is in fact our main villain Technically, we have 3 villains in the film: Icarus, Crow, and Erishim.
Yeah.
But I would say Icarus takes the main villain role.
But
in this
even
film.
then,
Oh, he's very well done.
the
But
only one I felt like was actually a villain was Crow, and the rest were just like had their different motives. Because in the end, the Celestial being born, everyone Earth dying was still.
yeah, it's like sacrificing 8 billion people so that Tiamat can create billions more, which is what the Celestials do. And that's the thing with Erishim, is though he's definitely the villain, you get it.
Yeah.
He's looking at this grand scale of things where humans are nothing and billions of other lives are billions of other lives.
Yeah.
Although it feels like since we're a planet of 8 billion, saying billions doesn't have quite the same weight as if it were a larger number.
I feel like it's trillions because
Well,
they
billions
show
is
them
what they
creating
say.
a galaxy and stuff.
They definitely create more lives than was on Earth. It's just when they call it billions, it doesn't have the same impact when we have billions of people on Earth.
I mean, it is only like 7 billion, maybe 8 billion people on Earth.
We gotta be about 8 now, I would think.
Yeah. Maybe not. I don't know, COVID by it.
Cold the herd. So he decides he's going to fight to stop them from saving humanity,
Yeah.
which doesn't sit well with pretty much everybody except for Sprite. So he goes to kill Fastos, and Kingo jumps in front, taking the hit. This was after quite a few nice friendship moments between Kingo and Icarus, of like calling him boss and everything. Kingo takes the hit. And Icarus and Sprite leave to ensure Tiamat wakes up. Kingo has such a cool character moment here where he agrees with Icarus that their plan is wrong. Saving humanity and risking the however many lives Tiamat will create is not right. But he's like, but I don't want to hurt any of you. So he just straight up leaves. And it's so good.
And his valet.
Karun, that's where he has a heartfelt speech of, in tears in his eyes, of thank you for everything you have done for humanity. And it's just like, oh my gosh. And they leave, and Kingo doesn't have a hero moment where he shows up at the end of the fight. No, he leaves. And it's so good.
Yeah.
Very well done.
It felt impactful. It's like, wow, he
Yeah.
really meant it and wasn't gonna just go back on his word.
Yeah. So, coming up with a new plan, Fastos creates a device that will combine the Eternal's powers to turbocharge Druig so he can succeed in putting Tiamat to sleep. Now, Mantis puts Ego to sleep, who is a Celestial, although I would say a baby Celestial, all things considered.
And also, he wants her to put him to sleep.
Helps him sleep, yes. Although he does force it, she does force it on him later in the movie.
Yeah. Yet can't turn Thanos to sleep.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Plan's not great, in my opinion. So, to make this work, the Eternals go to fight Icarus and stop Tiamat. As their ship approaches, Icarus boards the ship and fights Thena in a very cool fight. Very well choreographed. There's an awesome line of, because Thena's the goddess of war, she's so powerful, like, you've never fought me. And then Thena with a little smile, I've always wanted to, though.
And then proceeds to get bullied out of the ship.
Yeah, it was a good fight. So when that fight happens, he eventually leaves her to go find the others on the ground and realize they're not there. He seemingly kills Druig. Makari goes rage mode and beats the snot out of Icarus. Like, picture Quicksilver before Apocalypse tracked him in X-Men Apocalypse.
Yeah, and just
But longer and more impressive.
She beats the crap out of him so hard that he literally goes inside a volcano, basically.
Yeah, like, it was incredible to watch. But he does manage to catch her arms at one point and throw her aside.
Good reflex.
Yeah. And then Thena and Fastos arrive, and the 3 of them fight Icarus, Makari, Thena, Fastos. And Crow shows up.
Yeah, that was...
It's like they forgot about him. They're like, he needs to be here too. So Crow shows up, and Thena pursues him into a cave to avenge Gilgamesh.
I guess we should also mention that Erishim created the Deviants as well.
That's true, yeah.
Because that's a pretty big thing. And
so he originally created the Deviants for the purpose of the Eternal serve, but they went apex predator and started killing everything, so he made the Eternals stop the deviants. That's a fair point.
And he created them to keep evolving, and he created the Eternals to not keep evolving and to just stay in their spot. And that's why we look at Sprite and she doesn't age, and Hulk don't
exactly.
really age.
Exactly. So in the cave, the Mad Weary starts to take over her, and it's actually kind of subtle because Bill Skarsgård's voice is kind of similar to Don Lee's, but it's actually Don Lee's voice. So he uses Gilgamesh's voice to try and like lure her into stopping fighting because she's going nuts, and it's a hilariously short fight when she just slices him into a bunch of ribbons.
Yep. Yeah, they didn't. Really...
Yeah, Crow's ending was dumb.
Oh, and I guess we should also add when they revealed that showing the deviants were created by Arishem. They also showed that all of the Eternals are basically clones and such of each other, kind of.
Clones and robots.
Yeah, and that's also why Athena has these memories, because it's like her past clone or whatever that connects to her somehow.
Yeah, it doesn't quite make sense.
It's all kind of weird.
The things that they didn't explain should have explained. Some things they did explain didn't need to be explained. So with that, the last of the deviants that we know of is dead. Fastos uses his tech to pin Icarus to the ground. He has an awesome little "I've wanted to clip your wings for a long time," showing that they never really got along. So then Cersei, so with Druig dead, apparently, Cersei's now going to try and do what she did to the deviant, turn him into wood, to turn Tiamat to stone, to stop him running out. I'm going to kill him.
Or ice or whatever. I don't know.
I think they said stone at the end, but it definitely looked like ice.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, fix global warming, make a huge thing of ice, but no, just stone. Because the world doesn't have enough stone.
Yeah.
It's cobblestone.
They should have made it diamonds.
Yeah.
Ruin the stock market.
So Sprite then uses an illusion of Ajax to sneak up behind Cersei and stab her. And then Druig knocks her out because he's still alive. Ha
Yeah.
Look at that.
But Cersei still got stabbed.
Yeah, so Cersei
and walked it off.
Limps it off, I would say. I'm pretty sure she face planted after that.
But she still kind of just...
I don't remember seeing her get healed.
No, but then all of a sudden she was better.
Yeah, so that happens. Oh, she turned, something... She did something with her power. She changed the blood into something.
I don't know. There was something weird. Not too memorable.
Yeah, that happened.
Kind of weird.
And I would just love to say how Druig knocked out Sprite was legitimately just took a rock and bashed her over the head. Like, no fancy powers.
I turned to you.
Bonk!
I just turned to you and I went, she just got stoned.
Yeah, just bonk. It was great. Take that, Sprite, my least favorite character. No, so Icarus then breaks free and goes to kill Cersei. Can't bring himself to do it. Cersei turns Tiamat, who is rising from the ocean. You see, like, its hand and its head rising from the ocean. And they don't explain how the ones without the bands got their power pooled into it. Because they had Fastos created a band on everyone's wrist to unite their powers.
Yeah.
But Icarus and Sprite never put it on, and yet they were still giving their powers. They didn't explain that very well. But
they didn't explain it at all.
She gets all the powers and is able to turn the celestial Tiamat into stone. Icarus, then feeling guilty for his villainous crimes, commits suicide by flying into the sun. Get it, Icarus? He flew too close to the sun, so he burned and died. Get it?
Yeah.
Little on the nose, but fair enough.
Yeah.
So then, Cersei reunites with Dane. Sprite, Cersei is apparently able to use the last of her powers to turn Sprite into a human, so she gets to grow up.
Yeah, that was
apparently.
Okay.
Athena, Druig, and Makari leave Earth, leaving Cersei, Kingo, and Sprite, and Fastos on Earth.
Yeah.
Cersei reunites with Dane. Kingo goes back to Bollywood, and Fastos stays with his family. But then, Arishem arrives, literally, over the Earth. It's such a cool shot.
I know.
The clouds breaking, revealing Arishem.
And everything's like,
shot.
oh wow, this just happened.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh. It's like, with that one shot, you're like, Galactus can work now.
Yep.
That one shot's like, this can work.
But I'm also like, Galactus would just slap Earth and everyone would die.
I feel like they wouldn't bring him to Earth. No matter where they did it, I don't think they bring him to Earth, but it was that shot that confirmed that it could work.
Yeah.
So Arishem arrives. He takes the 3 Earthbound Eternals, Cersei and Phastos and Kingo, because Sprite no longer counts.
Well, no, did he take Kringo?
Took Kingo, yeah.
I didn't think he did, because
You got Kingo, Cersei, and Phastos, not Sprite. Sprite doesn't count anymore.
I thought he took someone else, because...
It was just the 3, I think.
Okay. Well, no, I didn't think it was him, because the 2 of them made sense for getting taken, because they went against his order, but Kringo never did. Kingo never did. I thought it was someone else.
I think it was Kingo.
Oh.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. We're gonna go with that, though.
So he takes them and says that he will spare humanity for now, but he's going to probe their memories and see if they were worth sacrificing a celestial for. He takes them with him as he does a cool fade out into nothingness.
Yeah. He literally looked like a black hole just forming, then...
Like what Galactus looked like in Fantastic Four 2.
Except a lot better.
No, I'm saying the portal he went through looked like Galactus in that terrible, terrible movie. And we cut to black.
And then credits.
Yeah, so our mid-credits scene, a couple weeks later, the Spacebound Eternals, which are Athena, Makari, and Druig, they're concerned because they haven't heard from the others in a while, so they decide to go back to Earth. They're interrupted by the arrival of Pip the Troll, who is voiced by Patton Oswalt, who is a good actor, but holy cow, Pip the Troll looked terrible.
Yeah, that was horrific.
Yeah, I figured out what it looked like he was from. Did you ever see the Sony animation film Epic?
Yeah.
That's what it looked like he was from. And it literally looked like they took a character who would have looked great in an animated film, but looked crappy in a live action film and put him
in. Yeah, it did not. Ooh.
Did not look good.
And then Star Fox showed up.
Yes, so Eros, Thanos' brother, played by Harry Styles.
That was a surprise.
Shows up. Also an Eternal. And he claims to know where the others are. And that's really the end of that mid-credit scene. Does this confirm Thanos is an Eternal? Maybe.
Yeah.
I have a hard time believing he's a robot with his head and arm being chopped off, but maybe. He might be.
I don't know. There's a lot of weird things going on with MCU with all this.
Yeah. And then our final scene is Dane Whitman, who was trying to tell Cersei something before Arishem arrived, has found his family sword. Yes, that sword. The Sword of Black Knight. Dane Whitman isn't the first Black Knight. His ancestors were. The blade is talking to him, and he's about to pick it up when a voice says, "Are you sure you're ready for that?" And the voice was 100% Blade. Oh boy, how do you say his name? Meher Salah Ali?
Something like that.
The guy from the Green Book who is cast as Blade, it is unquestionably his voice, so Blade technically makes his first appearance in Eternals. Although you don't see him, you just hear his voice. Yeah. That's all the heavy spoilers I can think of. Thoughts of the MCU at large now that this has happened?
There's a lot of things to take in with all this. It also feels weird knowing the timeline that it takes place in.
Yeah.
I feel like they definitely need to clarify a few things.
Even if it's a result of... they should have did a reshoot of that one scene just to make the timeline make more sense.
Which one?
The Ajax saying how long it's been since the people of Earth brought everyone back. Literally, that's all it would have taken to make it make so much more sense. Just put it after Far From Home, and everything's fine.
That would have made sense.
Yeah.
Make it after Shang-Chi and all that.
Oh, Far From Home is. Far From Home is still the furthest we've seen in the MCU. I thought for sure Eternals would be, but apparently not.
Nope.
Unless we get some further clarification. The timeline presented in the film is about 1 to 3 weeks after the end of Endgame.
And it was like, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And no one talks about a giant being coming from space over the sky.
And Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or not at all.
Or that there's a being that came out of the ground, is now a giant iceberg, whatever.
Yeah. It was an experience.
Yeah.
I don't like necessarily what it's implying for the MCU. It doesn't make much sense to me, but maybe it'll be good. Could be very good.
And if they're going to start throwing more cosmic beings, there's like 3 beings, maybe 2. I can think of off the top of my head. The other one's a multiversal being. But I really want Living Tribunal and Galactus. I think that'd be super cool. And then a multiversal being I'd like is Beyonder, but he'd probably collapse the entire MCU very fast.
Oh, well, at least we got Adam Warlock coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Will Poulter.
That's who I'm excited about. I'm really excited about Warlock. I hope they don't just kill him off in this movie. Though I don't know what they'll do with him.
Well, if it's the last Guardians film, I've heard rumors that he might die, but who knows? Who knows?
I hope not, because Adam Warlock's an interesting character. But also without the Infinity Stones, a lot of his comic important things aren't
Can't
there.
happen anymore.
And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. But it's good.
Mm. It was alright.
Before we get to our final verdict, let's talk about our favorite and least favorite scene. My favorite scene is with the Eternals reuniting with Gilgamesh and Athena at their house.
That was a pretty entertaining.
It is so funny.
Such an entertaining.
Their interactions are so good. What about you? What is your favorite?
I honestly really like the fight at the end with Icarus and Speedster.
Makari?
Yeah, but
Gotta remember the
I'm
name of
doing
your favorite.
horrible names. It's such a big name for my tiny head.
Get used to a lot of this, folks.
I'm trying my best.
My least favorite scene was definitely the sex scene.
Yeah,
I have no problem with characters getting intimate. It just felt unnecessary and tacked on, and not earned. Didn't feel earned.
And even that, it just felt like, okay,
This is happening now.
this is awkward.
It will undoubtedly cause some awkward conversations between parents and children on the car ride.
Oh yeah.
Unquestionably.
Well, what are those people? They were playing in the sand.
Yeah, like there's going to be some awkward conversations that come from that, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Final verdict. Our scale is a 100% scale. I judge things a little harsher than Nick does. We're not currently doing averages, so it's just what we thought. First,
I give it like a 76.
and I give it a 68. Now I'm a hard marker.
Yeah.
I am the type of person who will rate a movie I enjoy low if it's not a well-made movie.
Yep.
Case in point, Pixels. I enjoy Pixels. Is it a good movie?
No,
Nope, absolutely
it's
not. But I enjoy it. That's my honest appraisal of Eternals.
Not as bad as I was expecting.
No, it was
No.
much better than I was expecting. For all the people who say it's the worst in the MCU, they obviously never watched Incredible Hulk
No.
or the Iron Man sequels.
I don't like Iron Man 3. I like Iron Man 2 over Iron Man 3.
We'll get more into our MCU ratings another time. Next up for the Great Movie Ride podcast is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I'll be coming at you the 2 weeks after you see this one, and it'll be every 2 weeks. Hopefully, wherever you find your podcasts. I'm still working on figuring out how to actually post a podcast, but I'm looking into things, and hopefully it'll be available in pretty much everywhere you find your podcasts.
Yes. Hopefully.
There's also going to be a YouTube channel with these, so you can subscribe to that and hit the bell, comment, like, all that fun stuff.
Taco Bell.
Yeah. So this has been the first podcast of the Great Movie Ride. Thank you everybody so much for coming along and having a listen.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys.
You got our review of the Eternals.
Yeah.
And up next is Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
I have been Gaston.
And I have been Nick. Or Jerryofdom.
And don't forget to check out the Gmod Squad YouTube channel. We'll see you over there. Or we'll...
See us somewhere.
Wouldn't be see, but we'll appreciate your audience-ship and hear us talk about Shang-Chi
Yeah.
on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.
Yeah, bye.